All right, inspired by things like the history of English in 10 minutes, I'm going to do a couple minutes of brain case study. Use case, in this case, we're going to start with the lowly potato. And we might actually go to something like potato recipes, where we would find French fries, potato chips, potato salad, vichyssoise, a cold soup, mashed potatoes, but also we would find chuño, which is actually a form of freeze-dried potatoes, where the Incas way back in Peru and Bolivia would step on potatoes and sort of crush out their moisture and let them freeze in the cold, and thus preserve the potatoes so they could be eaten later. Not a dish I have had, but I'm interested in having. So potatoes. Then potato is actually a staple food in many countries, originates in Peru, is in fact a native plant of the Americas, along with hot peppers, maize, tomatoes. So these foods were not known anyplace else on Earth except for the Americas until we start crossing oceans. So hot peppers, for example, which are well known from Sichuan food, right, were not known in China until we start crossing the oceans. There are also native animals of the Americas. In this case, the Americas were kind of impoverished. No pigs, no cows, no horses. We get llamas, turkeys, vicuña, bison, alpaca. So basically, bison, turkeys, and one or another form of llama. And it turns out that guanacos and vicuñas were native, but llamas and alpacas were bred. Who knew that? Well, apparently I knew that at some point because I put it in my brain. So then we get the Great Columbian Exchange, thus named by a historian named Alfred Crosby, here he is, who wrote about what happens when Columbus crosses the ocean and stuff starts moving back and forth. And there's a famous book, Guns, Germs, and Steel, which comes out of this. But the Columbian Exchange then leads to a whole bunch of things crossing over. So horses hit the Americas, tomatoes hit Europe, chilies hit Asia, et cetera, et cetera. But in the Columbian Exchange, potatoes get brought from, and let's go down here to the bookmarks list, the breadcrumbs list. Potatoes actually get imported, and of the 400 kinds of potatoes that were in Peru and Bolivia that were being cultivated by Incas and others, they only bring 2 varieties of potato. And what you do with the potato is you cut the eyes and you plant the eyes. Each eye will sprout into a plant, and thus the potato crop across Europe is a clone. It's basically a completely fragile monoculture of 2 kinds of potato. Then as people start depleting the soil, they need a bit more, they need a little bit of fertilizer in the soil. They begin to import guano from the islands off of Peru and Argentina. We then also have the guano wars. Oops, let's see if I spell that right. We have guano, which is from the Quechua wanu, or dung. And we start having the War of the Pacific, or the Guano War. So people fight over the right to dig guano off these islands and bring it to Europe. You do not want to be digging guano. It's it smells horrifying. It's like, condensed pee and other kinds of things, very ammoniate. You do not live that long if you're busy digging sort of square meters of guano out from where birds have been nesting and dropping those on ships to send over. But it turns out that in one of those shipments of guano, they also shipped Phytophthora infestans, which is a water mold that, here it is, the guano shipment brought the potato blight to Europe, which then over the course of 3 or 4 months destroys the potato crop across Europe. Now, potatoes were this ugly thing that Europeans had to be convinced to eat. So Europeans would not eat potatoes. The French refused to switch to potatoes. Royalty had to trick people into eating potatoes because potatoes are actually quite nutritious. So, so Frederick the Great, for instance, was known as the Alte Fritz. He was also known as like the Potato King because he got Germans to eat potatoes. The French royalty would plant a crop of potatoes, put guards around them to pretend that they were very valuable, and then make sure the guards turned away to let people steal the potatoes so that they could plant them. So by the time the water mold hits potatoes, people are actually really dependent on potatoes as a major crop. The potato crop fails, and you get things like the Great Irish Potato Famine, the Great Hunger. And that leads to great migrations of Irish into America, for example. So you see a lot of that happening. Here's an article, The Fungus That Conquered Europe, leads to a whole series of things, including the Boston Draft riots. So that's a little history of the potato. There's probably more that I could say about it that I haven't noticed that I put in here. But it's kind of fun to knock about through history with some context. Thanks for watching.